Our story begins in Genesis 24, when Abraham, advanced in age, instructs his chief servant to go to Mesopotamia and seek a bride for Isaac. Abraham insisted that Isaac marry a young woman from his own country and kindred, not a Canaanite. Abraham is deeply concerned that Isaac should not marry a Canaanite, because he fears that this will draw Isaac away from worshiping the Lord. From Genesis chapter 9 onward, the Canaanites are frequently portrayed as being wicked. Abraham entrusts the important task of finding a wife for Isaac to his most reliable servant, the oldest of his household, who had charge of all that he had. After traveling over 400 miles, Abraham's servant arrived at Padan Aram. He brought his caravan to a well outside the city, and having faith in the Lord like his master Abraham, he prays at the well and asked the Lord for a sign that would let him know which young woman was to be Isaac's bride. We see God swiftly grants this request when a beautiful young woman came to the well carrying her water pitcher. She not only gave the servant a drink of water from her pitcher, but she also offered to draw water for his camels. These actions were the signs for which the servant had prayed, and he knew that this woman, Rebekah, was the young woman whom the Lord God has chosen for Isaac. When Abraham's servant asked Rebekah her name and the name of her family, he learned that she was the granddaughter of Nahor, Abraham's brother, and therefore was the grandniece of Abraham. Abraham's servant gives a lengthy speech informing Rebekah and her family of the nature of his mission and ensuring Rebekah's family that she will be well cared for. The servant then bestows gifts on the family to confirm his master's great wealth. Rebekah's father Bethuel and brother Laban acknowledge the divine providence of the situation and are convinced Rebekah should be Isaac's wife. With her family's blessing now behind her, Rebekah chooses to go to Canaan and indeed become Isaac's wife. One of the longest narrative episodes in the Bible concludes when Rebekah arrives at Abraham's homestead, and providentially, Isaac is the first person to meet her. The two become married and set the stage for our next chapter in the story of the Patriarchs, as Rebekah eventually gives birth to twins, Esau and Jacob. After Abraham and Sarah's deaths, the biblical narrative, chapters 25 through 36 of Genesis, turns to Isaac's twin sons, Jacob and Esau, but particularly Jacob. Like Sarah, Isaac's wife Rebekah was also barren, but the Lord responds to Isaac's prayer and Rebekah conceived the troublesome twins. The account of their birth is prophetically significant, and their names will signal further developments in the story. At birth, Jacob was given his name, translated as he grasps at the heel, an ancient Hebrew expression that means he deceives, and Esau's name meant red, hairy, or rough. The brothers' enmity began in the womb and would persist between the two men for decades. And through their offspring, the conflict continues to touch every corner of the globe to this very day. But that will be a topic for another time. The contrast between Esau and Jacob is also reflected in their personalities. The manlier, outdoor-oriented hunter Esau is loved by his father Abraham, who had a, quote, taste for wild game, whereas the quieter, domesticated nature of Jacob makes him his mother's favorite. Although they were twins, it's important to point out that Esau was considered the oldest son because he was born first. By Old Testament custom, he would have inherited most of his father's property and the right to succeed him as the family patriarch. But in a foolish, impulsive moment, he sold his birthright to Jacob in exchange for a bowl of soup. This determined that Jacob would carry on the family name in a direct line of descent from Abraham and Isaac, his father and grandfather. The loss of Esau's rights as a firstborn is further revealed in Genesis 27. The narrator states that Rebekah instigates and coordinates a subsequent deception undertaken by Jacob. This mitigates but does not remove Jacob's guilt in deceiving his father. Jacob deceives his elderly blind father by impersonating Esau. Jacob achieves this by wearing Esau's cloak and covering himself with goat skins in order to receive his father's highest blessing. Apparently, Esau was a very hairy dude. The stunt actually pays off, and Esau was therefore the recipient of a lesser blessing. Esau was so enraged by Jacob's actions that he determined to kill him once his father died. While Esau in many ways was more honest and dependable than his scheming brother Jacob, Esau sinned greatly by treating his birthright so casually that he sold it for a meal. To the ancient Hebrews, one's birthright represented a high spiritual value. But Esau did not have faith and far-sightedness to accept his privileges and responsibilities. Thus, the right passed to his younger brother. After Jacob's deception of his father Isaac, he has received the coveted blessing of the firstborn. While this deception grieved Isaac, it enraged Esau, and Esau vowed to kill Jacob as soon as their father passed away. This started a ticking clock, and Jacob knew he needed to split town immediately. Jacob's mother Rebekah suggests that Jacob flee the country to Haran in Mesopotamia to seek refuge with her brother Laban. Jacob also receives a side quest from his parents that he should seek a wife among their kindred, as Isaac had done before him. Tragically, this would be the last time Rebekah saw her son, as she would pass away during the 20 years Jacob would reside abroad. While fleeing from Esau, Jacob stopped for the night on a mountaintop where he came upon one of the most dramatic scenes of the entire Bible. According to Jewish tradition, the location of this event was none other than Mount Moriah. You may have heard this event referred to as Jacob's ladder. While Jacob slept, he had a dream of a staircase reaching from earth to heaven, with angels ascending and descending upon it, and the Lord above it. And God stood beside Jacob and said,
I am the Lord, the God of Abraham your father and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie I will give to you and your offspring. Your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth, and you shall spread about to the west and to the east and to the north and to the south. And in you and your offspring shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Behold, I am with you, and will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land. For I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you.
For those of you following along, you will no doubt recognize the promises of the Abrahamic covenant being passed down to Jacob, reaffirming that he is in fact the son prophesied by God prior as the younger that shall be served by the older. After Jacob wakes up from his vision, he exclaims that the site he's on was surely the house of God, and he was standing at the gate of heaven. Jacob dedicated the site as a place of worship, erecting a pillar there and consecrating it with oil. He called the place Beth El. Jacob packs up camp at the interdimensional gateway and continued on his 550-mile journey. He finally arrives in northwestern Mesopotamia, where he comes upon a group of shepherds and asks them if they know his uncle Laban. After answering him in the affirmative, he knows he has indeed arrived in his ancestral land of Haran. After arriving in Padanaram, our story picks up as Rachel, an attractive shepherdess, arrives on the scene with her flock of sheep. We're no doubt reminded of the similar tale where Jacob's own mother, Rebekah, helped his father's servant by watering his camels. Here, Jacob helps Rachel draw water for her sheep by removing a large stone from the well. After this feat of strength, Jacob converses with Rachel and learns she's a kinsman of his mother's family and is, in fact, Laban's daughter. Fortuitously, Laban is the very man he has traveled all this way to seek refuge with. With his side quest to find a wife in view, Jacob asks Laban for his daughter Rachel's hand in marriage. But because this is Jacob we're talking about, we know it won't be that easy. and his marriage mission will soon run into complications. Jacob agrees to work 7 years for Laban to pay the bride price for Rachel. This was another ancient custom where a prospective groom would pay the bride's family to take her as a wife. On the night of the wedding, Jacob consummates his marriage, but when he wakes up next to Rachel's sister Leah, Jacob knows that he, the deceiver and cheat, has been deceived. According to Laban,
"It is not so done in our country to give the younger before the firstborn."
Jacob honors the marriage with Leah and signs a contract with Laban to work another 7 years for Rachel. Laban honors this agreement, and after finally marrying Rachel, the one whom he loved, the story takes another wild turn as the two sister wives engage in a childbearing battle. Not to be outdone by the other, the sisters enlist their maidservants to pad their numbers. The final tally by the end of the episode is 12 sons and 1 daughter. And after 14 years of service to Laban, Jacob finally makes arrangements to head back to Canaan, to the land God promised him. But not before Jacob engages in a diabolical sheep breeding scheme where he hustles Laban out of the best animals in his flock. You can read more about these shenanigans in Genesis chapters 30 through 31. After making peace with Laban, Jacob's clan and their newly acquired wealth make way for their new home. But he must deal with even more unfinished business and reconcile with his brother Esau. It's been 20 years since Esau vowed to kill Jacob, and they parted ways. After Jacob and Laban have set each other's mischief aside and agree to a covenant to essentially leave each other alone, Jacob sets out for his biggest challenge yet, to reconcile with his brother without being killed. The reports Jacob receives regarding Esau aren't very promising. In anticipation of seeing Jacob after their 20-year estrangement, Esau is waiting for Jacob with an army of 400 men. So Jacob splits his caravan into 2 separate groups, so if the reunion with his brother goes poorly, some of his family and belongings may be able to escape the potential ambush. To demonstrate his genuine sense of deference towards Esau, Jacob decides to hedge his bets even further, and he prepares a massive convoy of gifts for his brother that'll arrive well before him and his family. But now for our main event. Jacob's journey has brought him to the Jabbok River. With his family safely camped on the other side of the river, Jacob is alone and lays down to sleep for the night. Suddenly, we're introduced to a mystery man who appears in Jacob's tent. The man then proceeds to wrestle in the dark with Jacob, and wrestle and wrestle. The 2 men battle until the sun begins to rise. The man pleads with Jacob to let him go, but Jacob refuses to relent until the man will bless him. At this point, Jacob has come to the realization that this is, in fact, no man, but God himself. Only after God puts Jacob's hip out of joint, an injury that Jacob will carry for the rest of his life, does God agree. Then he said, "Your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with men, and have prevailed." The renaming of Jacob brings to a climax, a lifetime of struggling with others. Through all this, Jacob has finally realized the importance of being blessed by God. The events of the preceding years have changed Jacob, and the God of his father has now become Jacob's God, Israel's God. Jacob is naturally in awe after the encounter, and in his penchant for renaming places, names the place Peniel, which means face of God. After Jacob sets out with his new championship wrestling belt, he finally meets up with Esau. Jacob slowly and cautiously approaches Esau using humility and generosity to disarm his potential rival. But Esau stuns the readers as he runs to affectionately greet his estranged brother. The men embrace and weep as they've at long last buried their animosity and have reconciled.